The top business stories live from the Sky newsroom. No knee-jerk response. Minister says that the UK won't rush into retaliatory measures against Donald Trump's trade tariffs. A fundamental reset. The oil giant BP says it will scale back its renewable projects following a big fall in profits. Plus, why that famous Michelin star still means so much to Britain's top chefs. Very good afternoon. On this Tuesday, Business Live with me, Darren McCaffrey. Donald Trump's decision to slap tariffs on imports of steel from the UK won't trigger a knee-jerk response from the government, according to ministers this afternoon. That's despite warnings about the devastating impact it could have on the industry. Well, Douglas Alexander, the Trade Minister, told MPs this afternoon the government would adopt a cool and clear-headed approach rather than rushing into retaliatory measures.
Of course, we want to avoid a significant escalation. We saw, if you like, retaliatory measures being taken under the first Trump administration. It feels to me that this is an opportunity for the UK to exercise both cool heads and a clear-eyed sense as to where the national interest lies. These tariffs are not going to be imposed until March the 12th. That gives us the time both to undertake the dialogue that is already underway, to reach a judgment on the basis of the analysis, which we have already done, and to ensure that our interlocutors in Washington and elsewhere are engaged in a constructive, mature dialogue.
Well, let's speak to our economics and data editor, Ed Conway. Ed, good afternoon to you. And there are many, aren't there, that are saying to the UK government, we actually have got very little to gain from putting retaliatory tariffs on, that actually maybe we should just sit and take the punishment, if you like.
Yeah, and what this is, well, aside from everything else, is quite an interesting test case in what the UK does and who it favours in these kinds of situations. We do still make quite a bit of steel. I mean, there's this kind of assumption that we don't make stuff anymore. And while it's certainly true that we, as a nation, have deindustrialised very quickly, we do still make a certain amount of steel products, particularly kind of high-end steel products, to the extent that you're talking about kind of £400 million worth of exports to the US in recent years. Now, some of that stuff is, like I say, high-grade stuff. You're talking about stainless steel. Some of it is products that America can't easily find elsewhere, so they potentially would just have to keep on importing them. Some of it is things like scrap steel, which is a little bit kind of paradoxical, because actually that is an ingredient for US steelmakers to make their steel with, so I don't imagine they would want for tariffs to be raised on it. But nonetheless, whether you take steel and whether you take aluminium, these are sectors where the UK still sends quite a significant amount of goods to the US, and I think that's going to be the question. I mean, last time around, remember, this is the second time we've had tariffs akin to this. So the first time was in 2018. Donald Trump slapped tariffs on steel, on aluminium. That time around, aluminium tariffs were 10%. This time they're 25%. That's now being confirmed that they're going to be 25%. But that time around, we were part of the EU. So we were part of the retaliation that was talked about at the time was something that the UK was part of because we didn't do our own trade policy. Now, officially, we're outside the EU. We do our own trade policy. So it's the first interesting test case of whether within that trade policy we're going to be like Europe or we're going to be different. And if we're going to be different, that means effectively, if you're not protecting the steel makers, if you're not protecting aluminium makers, then they might be affected. Well, they will be affected by this because they're very high tariffs. So it's going to be interesting, but interesting in italics, because I think, you know, if you're working in steel, if you're working in aluminium, it doesn't sound like the government's instantly riding to the rescue in the next few months at least.
And then we are still expecting even more announcements about tariffs, aren't we, in the coming days, potentially on the EU in particular. What I'm trying to get at here is we are now on a slippery slope, aren't we, into kind of a full-blown trade war, because the words, at least coming from Brussels, is that they will respond.
Yeah, well, Brussels has responded very differently, and they said that they will respond, and quite what that response is going to be, we'll have to wait and see. I mean, last time around, they put certain tariffs on certain American goods, things like Harley-Davidson. So that was the famous example. They banned, or rather put tariffs on particular types of motorcycles that meant that Harley-Davidsons were more expensive in Europe as a result of that. And that does seem to be the European mode. As for the UK, as I say, we'll have to wait and see. But it's hard to say, does this officially qualify as a trade war, or is it something else? I mean, we're definitely in a period where Donald Trump has said that he wants to use tariffs as much as possible as a form of, well, he said it's his favourite word. He wants to use it as a form of diplomacy. He wants to use it as a negotiating tool. Does this kind of mean that you're having this tit-for-tat exchange in trade controls? Well, you're starting to see it, but it's still early days. And I think the question really that we need to kind of work out is, at what point does the economic impact of this start to be felt? So those tariffs on steel and aluminium, they're not kicking in until next month, so early March. The tariffs that we've got on China, that the US has on China rather, they're starting now to be felt, but you're still yet to actually see those first shipments coming across the Pacific that are actually paying tariffs. So it's a gradual kind of ratcheting up of the economic impact. And as that gradual ratcheting up happens, you would expect for more businesses in the US, for instance, to say, listen, this is something we're worried about. You'd expect for more businesses on the other side in the UK and the EU to say, this is something we're actually seeing the impact of. But for the time being, there's lots of talk about it and lots of concern amongst economists, because economists hate tariffs. But what we don't have yet is the direct impact, aside from looking at things like, metals prices. You mentioned something that might well be happening. I mean, we've talked about steel, we've talked about aluminium. Some people think, and Donald Trump has mentioned, that copper might be one of those metals that he might look at in the future because he wants to protect the US copper mining industry. So there could, I suspect there will be many more to come. And that's before you get into the bigger question of, what about those tariffs on Canada? What about the tariffs on Mexico? Do we see broad-based tariffs against the European Union, or does it stay in this kind of, sector-by-sector basis? No one knows, to be honest, Darren. And so I think we're taking kind of each day at a time, and we're watching to see what Donald Trump says. And then afterwards, we're watching to see what those executive orders say. And we're just going to have to pace ourselves.
Just stay there for a second, because we've actually got an interview that's been carried out with Angela Rayner, the Deputy Prime Minister, this afternoon on this issue of tariffs. Let's have a listen to what she had to say.
Well, we know that British Steel has been through a very difficult time, and our business secretary has been working hard with the industry to make sure that we have a future for British Steel. We've been doing that already. We will continue to do that, and our focus is making sure that that pipeline for that industry goes way on into the future. Obviously, we'll have to see what comes out of the US and what that means to UK steel, but this government is committed to supporting that industry into the future.
You're telling it has a future in this country?
We absolutely believe that British Steel has a future. We're investing in British Steel, we're working with the industry, and of course our infrastructure and long-term planning that we're doing around rebuilding in Britain, British Steel has a crucial role to play in that too.
And just give us a sense, just on steel domestically here in the UK. I mean, ever since I was a kid, it feels that the death of British Steel has been talked about. How close to death is it? And if these tariffs do come into play, is it going to tip it over the edge? Or are people like the Labour government, would they be willing to step in if really necessary?
Well, that's the question. It's not by any means dead, but it has been a long period of deindustrialisation and shrinking, essentially. Just the output of how much steel we're producing, that's been going down. Steel products, that's been going down. The number of people who work within steel, that's been going down. And partly what you have here is this kind of, this gradual process we've talked about with the UK deindustrialising, high energy costs, all of these reasons why you're shutting down plants. But partly there's an environmental thing happening as well. Making steel, particularly in blast furnaces, is just traditionally what we've done in the UK, is really carbon intensive. It's a massive amount of CO2 coming out of those blast furnaces. And so they have also started to be shut down for environmental reasons as well as for business-related reasons. And you've seen that in Port Talbot. So that blast furnace there, or two blast furnaces, they have been shut down. That's happened. So if you're looking at the total quantum of steel that we're producing, it is a fraction of what it once was. But there are still some companies still going. British Steel is still there, up in Scunthorpe with a couple of blast furnaces, although questions remain about what's going to happen there. In Port Talbot, they're changing those blast furnaces into different types of furnaces, so electric arc furnaces. So it's not like it's gone, but it's definitely shrunk. And I think it's been, is this going to be the straw that breaks the camel's back? It does feel like, it's been one thing after another. And you talk to people within steel, and it's been a really tough period. And what they worry about is, for all those words you heard about them from Angela Rayner, is this British government going to be as enthusiastic about supporting steel workers as, for instance, the American government is in supporting American steel workers? Because that's what's happening here. Donald Trump is saying we're standing behind steel workers, we're erecting these walls around the entire sector. They think they have the heft to be able to do that economically. But here in the UK, it's not entirely clear that the government would be comfortable doing that, partly because it's just not really in our ethos. We're not traditionally very protectionist, at least not for the last kind of 150 years. And it looks like that's the way things are going to continue. But who knows? Like I say, we are in uncharted territory for the global economy now. To have the global superpower turning back towards protectionism in this way, with this enthusiasm, we haven't seen that for a very long time, at least since Nixon, or indeed further back into the history books. So it's an unsettling moment.
It is indeed. Ed, as always, great stuff. Thank you very much indeed. Ed Conway there live for us this afternoon. Just bringing you up to date with some breaking news, and that is the Church of England's ruling body. The Synod has been voting this afternoon on a safeguarding policy. You may remember it follows, of course, the resignation of Justin Welby, the Archbishop of Canterbury, at the end of last year. Let's bring in Lisa Holland, who has been covering this story for us at Church House in Westminster. Lisa, what's been happening this afternoon?
Well, the General Synod, which is the Church's Parliament, effectively went into this week-long meeting of members with an option to take radical measures to improve safeguarding within the Church of England, having faced a string of scandals, which, as you say, one of them led to the resignation of the Archbishop of Canterbury himself, Justin Welby. Now, the vote has taken place this afternoon. There were various options on the table, and it has to be said that the Church of England has stopped short of taking a step to send all safeguarding to an external body. Now, some will say that if the Church of England wanted to send a message that it really hears survivors and it's really taking this issue of safeguarding seriously, that it could have voted to give all measures to an external body. Now, I have with me Helen Ann Hartley, Bishop Helen Ann, who is the Bishop of Newcastle. First of all, what's your reaction to this vote? As I understand it, it means that safeguarding will be taken to an external body, but those in the diocese, the officers, will not be managed by that external body. What does that mean for you?
So I'm really disappointed by the outcome. I think that many victims and survivors, many of my colleagues, myself particularly, were hoping that the Synod would go for the model that drove us immediately towards complete independence. I think it's unfortunate that the amendment that has ended up, as it were, somewhere in between, and I think lacking clarity, was moved by a bishop, and I think there will be a need now to provide a clear time frame and a timeline so that we do actually end up with complete independence. But I ended up abstaining in the final vote, which I'm really deeply sad about, because I had wanted complete independence now.
Some people will say that this vote sends a kind of message that the Church of England doesn't get it. It doesn't get the crisis that it's in, and it needs absolute transparency and should have voted for complete independence. What would you say to that?
Well, I agree. I think for many survivors, they will see this as a punch in the gut. I think we had an outstanding speech from Marcia de Cordova, the Second Estates Commissioner MP, who gave a very clear signal that this is a watershed moment for the Church. And I'm afraid what this looks like is that we're just kicking the can down the road, and we are failing our duty to victims and survivors. And I'm really desperately sorry and quite angry about that.
Why do you think some in the Church of England would have voted for what was seen as a option 3.5, that some people are calling a fudge, and wouldn't just say, yeah, we do get it? Why would somebody who voted for that fudge option, why would they do it?
I think that in the speeches there was, my sense of hearing it was that there was a certain amount of confusion and a bit of scaremongering, I have to say, amongst some of my colleagues about what would happen if we tried to go to complete independence. When actually I think there were some really good speeches that said, no, actually we can get there. If there's a will, there is a way. And I think the speeches that voted against or that spoke against it ultimately failed to grasp the real crisis that the Church is in and how this will be perceived.
Bishop Helen, thank you so much for coming to talk to us outside Church House. The General Synod there failing to take that step to give complete safeguarding to an external body, instead saying that safeguarding will be managed by an external body, but those diocesan officers who the actual complaints go to, they won't be managed by that external body. So some people seeing that as a missed opportunity.
OK, Lisa, outside Church House there in Westminster. Thank you very much indeed, Lisa Holland there. OK, you're watching Business Live here on Sky News. Coming up in just a couple of minutes, we're going to be talking about Michelin star restaurants and how they've been awarded more stars overnight. Some 22 restaurants. We'll be talking to one top chef in just a couple of minutes. Stay tuned.
Minister, how are you?
Good morning. Good morning.
Nice to see you. How are you feeling?
Looking forward to getting into the parliamentary chamber.
Are you any further forward to making a decision?
No, it's an important day today.
All of the claims were in line with my parliamentary duties, so I'm making that clear to you, Conor.
He was a Scot through and through.
He was a very good politician.
Alex Salmond was controversial, he was a disruptor, but above all, he was respected.
Will you resign if you lose this week?
Again, I'm not planning to, of course, lose the vote of no confidence. I'm planning to win that vote of no confidence.
His face said it all.
My intention to stand down as party leader.
This is now a storm with deadly consequences. How are they feeling?
They're a bit scared at the minute.
We've been told to evacuate.
How are you feeling?
Devastated.
Hundreds of homes were wiped out by flooding. I'm Conor Gillis, Sky's Scotland correspondent.
It was probably the darkest time in my life.
Scott is 5 years sober after a cocaine addiction left him close to death.
Scotland has a shameful record, worse than England, the worst in Europe. Why not just say you failed? Because then you might get more respect from families who've lost loved ones.
This is where one of the UK's most prolific rapists thought he'd got away with murder.
Sky News can reveal that former sex workers had told police he was sexually violent.
My Emma.
Free wherever you get your news. It's over, isn't it?
The Americans say he is Rossi, a fraudster.
This has been one of the most bizarre cases ever heard in a courtroom in this country.
A dangerous murderer.
Do you think you'll ever be able to forgive Andrew Innes after this?
She said she can forgive him, but as long as he's behind bars.
By doing the right thing, it's destroyed your life.
They terrorised me. They intimidated me.
Sky News, the full story first.
I saw police being forceful, pushing young men and women to the ground as they made almost 100 arrests. Will the cold affect your voters?
Well, we have a lot of tremendous support.
Free wherever you get your news. The people here know that worse storms may well be on their way. I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles.
Mandatory evacuation, you must leave!
For many people, Harvey is far from over.
People here believe the water will be this deep for weeks.
I'm Greg Milam, and I'm Sky's chief North of England correspondent. Are you trying to run me over, Sir Philip?
No, go away.
Look like it, sir. Will you respond to those who made accusations, Sir Philip?
Can you go away?
Sky News, the full story first.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
This is the game changer seat. Look, it even comes with binoculars. flying minutes, fly better. Thank you.
Now, it was a big night for the restaurant industry last night, the awarding of Michelin stars. 22 restaurants were given the accolade, including the first vegan restaurants to be given the award. Well, I've been speaking to Jean Delport. He is the Michelin star chef from Restaurant Interlude in Sussex.
For me, obviously, I think a lot of people have personal tributes to it. For me, growing up as a kid, it was like a dream for me. To really kind of put ourselves on the map and compare us with the best across not just the UK, but across the world. So I think for us, it gives us put us in a prestigious area where we really just want to showcase the best of what we can do and the best of the UK. So yeah, for us, it's just a whole new area of just playing around and just enjoying ourselves, but showcasing the restaurants themselves.
And what does it mean in terms of the work that has to go into it? You know, these restaurants, your restaurant, the creme de la creme, if you don't mind the pun, of restaurants. It's a lot of work, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's not just the day-to-day stuff that every guest would see. There's a lot behind the scenes. It's full on. It's sometimes 6 days a week. There's no off switch sometimes, and sometimes there is. It's just having that to juggle it around. But it's a real true calling. It's a passion, and it's something that if you love it, it really comes naturally. And something that, yeah, I think we have a lot of pride in what we do, and we want to showcase us on the best possible platform. So, yeah, for us, it's absolutely amazing to be part of something like this.
And do you feel that it is, you know, people have been making food since man began, if you like, but cuisine is constantly changing, isn't it? It is interesting that this year's the first year that a vegan restaurant, for example, has been given a Michelin star. It's a sign that it is also an industry that is constantly evolving.
Yeah, I think hospitality itself has always been a strong place for evolving and kind of going with trends and what people really want. I think in the instance of us having our first vegan restaurant in the UK to get a star is so well deserved. It's really kind of pushing the boundaries and showcasing what food can really be if people want it, and how if someone's really passionate, and they can showcase that on the highest standards. So, I mean, that's the whole challenge. That's why we love what we do, because we get to push ourselves every single day to something new. And yeah, I mean, it's just absolutely incredible for us.
And we're just looking at pictures of your restaurants down in West Sussex. I have to say, it's making me pretty hungry just looking at it. You've clearly focused a lot, haven't you, on natural ingredients from farms and nearby. But you talked there, didn't you, about what people now expect or what the trends are. Where are consumers when it comes to restaurants these days? What do they want, do you think?
Yeah, I think ultimately now for us, it's very much going as an experience-led eating day out or evening out. People really want to get away, break away from what they're doing on their day-to-day lives and kind of just have that distraction. So we strive ourselves providing ourselves with, or providing guests with somewhere that they can go, just completely take away their whole day lives and just going for it, and just, I suppose, essentially come onto our estate and just rediscover what we can offer, what our food is, and for myself to showcase a little bit of South Africa, a little bit of Cape Town, in amongst the countryside of West Sussex.
Let's get down to business if we can, in the sense that it's a tough business, isn't it? You know, restaurants go under all the time, people try to start them and they don't succeed. How difficult is it at the moment, or is business pretty good?
No, it's challenging. I mean, I suppose the last 12 months to 18 months, it's been challenging, and it's still feeling like it's still getting a little bit harder. We're obviously looking forward to summer and spring again. It's just the margins are quite tight, and it's one of those things where people they're just a bit more conscious of what they're spending. So, I mean, what we find is in the week, maybe our spend isn't as high. The weekends are generally for us pretty good still. So, yeah, it's just kind of trying to ride it out as much as we can and try and be inventive and try and get guests through from around just the country, which is what ultimately Michelin helps us with.
And how do you make it accessible? You know, with a lot of people watching here who've never been to a Michelin star restaurant, frankly, they'd say, there is no way I can afford ever to go. There are some restaurants who are doing lunchtime deals. We've been covering this on the Money blog on our Sky News app, looking at them putting on special deals to try and get people in through the door, people who might not go to Michelin star restaurants. I suppose my question is, it's still quite an exclusive club, isn't it? How do you try and change that?
Yeah, I mean, it can be perceived as an exclusive club, but it can also be perceived as a very accessible club. I think there's, like you said, there's loads of deals going around all the time. People are trying to innovate and trying to showcase their own style, but still being accessible to everyday life. So I think it just takes a little bit of research and understanding and having a look and see. Everybody thinks that it's not affordable because it's got maybe a bit of a stigma to it. But I think if you start peeling back those layers and looking behind the scenes, it actually isn't as unaffordable as people think. And you can still have a really good meal for a really decent price.
And just very finally, you are a top chef, someone who loves the food. If it comes to a cheap bite to eat, though, kind of a bit of a guilty pleasure, what's your favourite recommendation?
Oh, I'm a bit of a sucker for burgers, to be fair. So anyway, that's doing a really good smash patty or burger that's it could be at any level, and I'll always enjoy it. So yeah, I'm not funny when it comes to things like that.
I know. I have to say, I'm a bit of a Five Guys fan as well. Do love a burger, can't beat it. Sean, thank you very much indeed for your time, and good luck with everything this coming year.
Awesome. Thank you very much for your time.
Is it from me on Business Live for today. This is the live shot from the White House where President Trump is due to meet the King of Jordan. It comes, of course, at a time in which he is encouraging the country to take refugees in from Gaza. We're expecting that to happen any moment. Full coverage with Mark Austin at the top of the hour. I will see you tomorrow.